Awesome.
So, welcome everybody to the At-Home Songwriting meeting where we have a special guest today. So, Dana Baker is a vocal coach, a vocal producer. She is a singer herself from Nashville, Tennessee. So, great to have Dana joining us. Just some housekeeping things. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions for Dana, put them in the chat, and then I will sort of curate questions and kind of bring it up at natural points when Dana's talking about different topics. Also, you'll have the opportunity to raise your hand when Dana has some pauses and things as well. Um, I am a little bit better, and maybe I'm not good at it, but I feel like I'm more used to like taking questions kind of on the fly. So today I want to make sure that we give Dana some time to breathe and not throw her off her topic. So just try to wait till there's a natural pause, maybe write down your questions and then we can get them answered. But I'm super excited to have Dana doing this because I am here to learn myself. What's kind of nice about this is I didn't have to prepare anything for this workshop, so we're good. But Dana, welcome to At Home Songwriting, and we're all super excited to have you, joining us.
Thank you so much. Yeah. If you have a question, feel free to ask it in the chat or raise your hand. And I'd love to kind of go into questions while I'm still on that topic, but we can definitely do some at the end as well. Everybody who submitted questions, I tried my best to incorporate your questions into the presentation. So hopefully a lot will be answered during, but feel free to stop me at any time. It's going to be a lot more anatomy than I think people are anticipating. So if any of it is like kind of like, ooh, that's interesting, feel free to just look away. I'll let you know when we have one particular slide where there's like a bump on your vocal cords. And I tried to find a non-gory picture, but it's just a little bit of anatomy to kind of understand how the whole mechanism within your voice box works. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, and you can all see the presentation.
Yep, we're
All right,
good.
sweet. Awesome, awesome. So this is the vocal workshop with Dana Baker. I have a bachelor in arts and music from Florida State University. A little bit about me. I've been singing from the age of 3, ranging from being in choir, singing pop, singing opera, even singing some rock and R&B stuff, pretty much everything in between. Pride myself on being a vocal chameleon. A big thing about me is that in the past, I've struggled with pain and tension in my singing. So when I went to college for music, I basically learned how to sing the wrong way. Couldn't sing for longer than 20 minutes without feeling in pain and raspy. And so I made it kind of my life's mission while I was in college to learn how to sing in a way that is pain free, tension free, and just feels good. So I've done a lot of digging into that in particular. Most people at the collegiate level at my school would study with maybe 1 or 2 vocal professors. I studied with 6. So I just wanted to get the most overall range of how we can tackle these issues that we run into as singers, because when we hear people like Beyonce and like Adele and huge belty singers on radio, I think we all think we can do that, and we don't know that there's actually training and there's a lot of intention behind what they're doing. So I'd love to kind of show you today how you can sing in a way that is going to be impactful but still healthy, because the two can happen at the same time. In the past, I've taken thousands of vocal lessons, I've taught hundreds, and a lot of it is helping with pain and tension. Some of them are more so about like stylistic choices. And I mainly work as a vocal producer. So, what that is, I made a little Venn diagram to kind of show you what I do and then show you what other types of vocal specialists do. So basically, if you start at the bottom right, you've got the vocal instructor. They build their students' singing voices from the ground up. So these are people that might have trouble with matching pitch, getting the basic breathing down, all that kind of stuff. They are what I call builders. There are builders and tuners when it comes to people who specialize in voice. Tuners make kind of fine adjustments. So that's what a vocal producer does. While as builders, they are the ones that are like working from the ground up and just basically like helping you realize how your voice works. In the middle is vocal coach. So a vocal coach basically takes somebody that has a decent understanding of their voice and just kind of amps it up to the next level. It's also people that are very scientifically minded, and they basically know what they need to do to iron out the kinks in someone's voice without necessarily being there on like the ground level. So I've done all three of these in different capacities, and they're all great. I just believe that they are different skill sets. So wanted to take a second to kind of just show you what you might need depending on your experience level or depending on what you're doing musically. If you literally just need somebody to like listen and help you build up harmonies, vocal producer. If you need somebody to help you iron out the kinks in your voice, vocal coach. And then if you're kind of starting from the beginning, you'd probably be best off with more of like a vocal instructor type of thing. Workshop goals. I would love for you to leave here with knowledge about how your voice works, insight about how to use it in a way that's impactful but still healthy. I'd love to give you applicable tools to be able to do so and more confidence, because I feel like a lot of us are like, oh, I can't sing. It's like, well, you know, if you speak, you actually can sing. It's just a matter of whether or not you have the confidence to pursue it and to practice it. So if you can speak, you can sing. Our first lovely diagram. So this is basically the inside of your voice box. These white strips right here, those are your vocal cords, also called vocal folds. When I took vocal pedagogy in college, we call them vocal folds. But you know, if that's too highfalutin to kind of call them the folds, you can definitely call them the cords. They're the same thing. Basically, you have air coming in from your lungs that are coming up to the vocal folds in order to help you produce sound. So, of course, we can't really breathe or we can't really speak or sing without taking a breath. It just wouldn't work. So, you have the air coming up from your lungs, meeting the vocal folds, and those vocal folds are going to be vibrating together to make sound. So, usually they're in kind of an open state, like in the picture. But then when you go to make sound, they come together and they vibrate. And I actually have a little video to show you just how that works.
Dana, is there audio?
Oh, there is. It's not sharing. Uh-oh. Okay.
No. So hit stop share, and then when you
Okay.
go to share, then you have to click the little box to share audio. I wish Zoom would just automatically share audio. It's the dumbest thing.
Yeah. I totally forgot about that. So thanks for catching me on that. I meant to say before I started the video too, so this is actually an excellent pausing point. So your vocal folds, they are going to elongate when you sing higher notes. They're going to shorten when you sing lower notes. And basically, they're going to vibrate together at a slower rate with lower notes and then at a faster rate with higher notes. So you can think about your vocal folds a lot like a guitar string. So when you're tuning your guitar and you're making that tuning peg tighter and tighter and tighter, the note gets higher because there's more tension. And then if you take the tuning peg, you turn it the opposite way and you make the string looser, that sound's going to be lower. So the vocal folds actually do a very similar thing. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight that and then just notice those kind of like movements and shifts as she switches through pitches.
Here is a look at some normal young female vocal cords during a stroboscopic exam.
So pretty cool stuff. That is the science behind your vocal folds. And here's just a little bit of a diagram to show you exactly where everything sits within your voice or within basically like all of the muscles. So something I want you to notice, of course, we've got the closed versus the open. There's not going to be a test, so don't feel free or don't feel like you have to memorize any of this, but it's more so just like a demonstration tool. That tongue that you notice, most of us just think of the tongue as just like the top part, like that top half to a third, but our tongue actually extends all the way down to our jaw, and it's a very strong and powerful muscle, which can cause tension. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but I just wanted to draw a special attention to that because your tongue can really get in the way as far as tension, and knowing how big and strong and massive it is can really help guide you as far as knowing how to relax it and make sure that it doesn't get in the way of your singing. Did you know you actually speak on a pitch? I was doing a voice lesson with an instructor once, and she asked me what I ate for dinner the previous night. I kind of looked at her like she had three heads. I was like, I don't know how this is relevant, but this is what I ate for dinner. And then while I'm saying all that, she's staring at me and going, and I'm like, what is happening? So she found out I actually speak on a G and bass clef. That's the note that I speak on. Being a soprano, that's kind of really low in my range, actually. And something that speaking on a pitch or knowing which pitch we speak on enables us to do is to be aware of if we're doing vocal fry. So you may or may not know what vocal fry is, but if you think of like a Paris Hilton or a Kim Kardashian, like the whole Valley Girl, like, oh my God, like that graveliness, that's vocal fry. And especially in American culture, it's just how a lot of us talk. It's not super duper healthy, but it isn't usually super damaging unless you're just talking on vocal fry all the time, all day, every day. Because what happens is those vocal folds, instead of vibrating nice and smoothly, like the singer in the video we just saw, it's more of like a forceful clapping type of motion. And of course, you saw those muscles are like very thin and not really, able to take a whole lot of a beating. So you don't want to be creating more friction on your vocal folds. So if I talked like this all the time, I'd kind of just really be setting myself up for failure there. You can use vocal fry in a healthy way as well, but just making sure that when you do speak, it's not just like this all the time. Now, vocal nodes and polyps. This is the image that I was warning you guys about. So feel free to look away if it's a little too anatomical. But basically, if we misuse our voice, if we do a lot of vocal fry, if we do a lot of like belting, if we do that's not really healthy belting, if we misuse our voices, we could be susceptible to growing vocal nodules and polyps. Basically, a nodule, it's going to be on both sides, and it's going to be just a little bump. And I will say it's not a death sentence. A lot of people have had these and have either gotten surgery or have recovered naturally just through resting and learning how to properly use their voice. But they are preventable. So by taking the steps needed in order to sing in a healthy way, you'll actually most likely won't develop these. Same thing with polyps. Polyps are kind of blood-filled sacs, and they're more so like a blister. Also, I will pause for a second because I see there's like 7 questions in the chat. I don't see what they are, but I want to make sure I address them before we go forward. 8 now.
So Dory had a question about are you familiar with Seth Riggs and his speech level singing?
I'm actually not.
And then Dory also asked, can having surgery alter the sound of your voice?
It can. It just depends on what you're having done. And I would work with either your ENT, your nose throat doctor, or a vocal coach to see if things have drastically shifted. But surgeries aren't make or break. It's not going to turn you from a soprano into a bass or something like that. Usually it's just a matter of making little adjustments, and things might feel a little bit different.
Stu asked, can you hear if someone has vocal nodules?
Not to my knowledge. Usually you'll hear the raspiness and the grittiness in their sound after they sing. So I don't know if you've ever gone to a concert and you felt like you couldn't talk afterwards, or you had like a really raspy voice. So they might just sound like that in their speech if they're overusing their voice a lot, whether or not they have nodules. Like Demi Lovato in particular, I noticed a shift in her speaking voice when she basically was in the midst of misusing her voice, and now I think she's on a, an upward trajectory to be using it better. But you kind of can hear that they've overused it, but not necessarily like, oh, they definitely have nodules, if that makes sense.
There was another question. If you have laryngitis for over a month, should you see a doctor?
Definitely. Yeah. Most colds, viruses, or anything of that sort are about 7 to 10 days max. So if you have it longer than that, any kind of laryngitis or any kind of like sickness, I definitely would see an ENT. There are things you can do to make sure that you're still kind of like using your voice in a way that's not going to hurt. Just to make sure, like, there's this thing I'll go over later, and it's basically vocal yoga. It's like a gentle stretch for your vocal folds. So that will be really, really helpful from being on the road to recovery. But yeah, I definitely, if it's been longer than a month, I would just kind of see ENTs, ear, nose, throat doctors in your area, and see what they would recommend.
And then Shelly has a question. Can you speak about sinus impact?
Sinus impact. Yes. So we're going to talk about placement a little bit later, which when you have a very nasal sound, that means you're basically singing too far forward. So normally when we sing, we want to have a neutral placement, like an if it's too far forward, it would be like an and that sounds a little bit, like nasally, potentially a little obnoxious if you're overdoing it. And then on the flip side, you can be like and that way you're over darkening. So focusing on placement is huge as far as making sure the sinuses aren't really impacting your sound. That would be my response to that.
Awesome.
But everything is connected. So if you're sick and your sinuses are on the struggle bus, it's going to come through when you're singing, unfortunately. But I would just say don't sing when you're sick if you can help it at all. If you've got an idea of a song and you just have to get it out on a voice memo, maybe sing the notes an octave down, because it's a lot harder to do damage in your lower register rather than your, higher voice.
Cool. So what are we looking at on the screen, Dana?
All right. I just saw that there's still 18 in chat, so I wasn't sure if I caught up with everything.
Oh no,
Um,
some of them are just comments, I think.
oh, gotcha, gotcha. Well,
Yeah.
thank you in advance for the comments. I will read them in a little bit. So I've already scared you with what can happen if you misuse your voice. So now we're going to go into the positive of how to set yourself up for success so that you can feel confident and not sing in a way that's going to, make you feel in pain or raspy. So the very first thing to focus on is posture. Now, I love this diagram because it basically goes into all the different ways that people might usually stand. So if you're leaning too far forward, if you're leaning too far back, if your chin is tilted up is like a big one, because when you tilt your chin up, you're creating extra tension in your jaw and in the base of your tongue, and it can really inhibit your ability to get in a proper breath, but also sing in the most impactful way. And then, of course, slouching, which I mean, I look like that at 5 p.m. every day after work. So, like, I get it, but we have to make sure that we're standing up nice and straight when we are singing. So, a really good way to know that your posture is what it needs to be is kind of like feet shoulder width apart, standing up just like you don't have to be like super duper tense and erect in your stature, but just standing up straight. And then I would roll your shoulders back and feel an expansion in your rib cage, because when your rib cage and basically like your sternum feel like nice and open as opposed to collapsed, nice and open, you're going to be able to maximize the amount that you can use your lungs. You're going to be able to take in deeper breaths. You're going to be able to use your breath more efficiently. So just standing up straight, shoulder width apart, roll your shoulders back, and that should be what you need in order to have good posture. As far as what's happening with your breath, here's a diagram of the lungs and the diaphragm. So the lungs, of course, are the blue and the purple, and then the diaphragm is the red and the orange. So basically, they contract and expand in order to allow air into and out of your body. Now, when you take in a breath, I want you to remember three things: low, slow, and silent. I see a lot of people, especially when they're singing a song where they don't have a lot of time to breathe, they'll go, and what that does is it really gives you a shallow breath and it's all kind of concentrated up here, and you're not going to be able to take in as much air as you really need. So you want it to be low, concentrated around like your belly, like belly breathing. And then you want it to be slow. So not super duper quick, just nice and slow, especially if you're starting a new phrase. You should have time to set these things up. And if you have to take like a quick breath within there, it doesn't have to be it can just be like, and then you start the phrase. And also silent, because if you're and creating all that excess sound, you're also restricting your airflow. So low, slow, and silent. Feel the expansion in your belly. And that's how you're going to want to breathe. You'll notice that you're able to access a lot more of your lungs that way. And here's just a diagram as far as the belly breathing. So basically, it's not like, but it's more so like down belly button area. Some people call it basically having like an inner tube around your midsection that you're filling up. So you can think about that too. So you're expanding around basically your stomach, and you can feel like you're like filling up an inner tube full of air. And that can also be helpful to just have that visual when you're going to breathe. Myth number 1, you always want to breathe from your diaphragm. I have very bad news. Your diaphragm is an involuntary muscle, so you actually cannot control it. However, this sentiment is helpful, and it's still the dogma within the music industry because it helps guide us to where we should be breathing, which is a low breath. So when you think of breathing from your diaphragm, you're not thinking of like taking those gaspy breaths using your shoulders. You're thinking of using more so like your stomach and your abdominal muscles. So it's good in that it encourages you to take a low breath, but technically you can't sing from your diaphragm. Now, as far as utilizing your abs, namely your lower abs, is what you're going to lean into for support. So your abdominal engagement coupled with the subglottal pressure built up underneath the vocal folds creates an onset. That was a lot of big words, so let me break it down. Subglottal pressure, all that means is what I was talking about earlier, when the air comes up through the lungs and it hits your vocal folds, and then they vibrate together to make that sound. When you take that sensation of the air coming up and then you use your abdominal muscles to support your sound, that's what basically makes what's called an onset. So an onset is just, basically like the start of the phrase, or if you do a more separated staccato exercise, you're basically just doing onsets. So like a ba, 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 that would be straight up onsets. So basically where your core meets your air, that equals an onset. How are we on questions? I saw a couple.
So Jeanette asked something about how do you find the right range for your voice? I think you might cover that later.
I will. Yep. Got like
And then Michelle said when she was taking voice lessons as a child, she was taught to do panting.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I would be very curious to see what type of exercise exactly panting was. I think panting probably just wants you to more so engage the muscles and get them working. But there's a better way to do that, because I feel like when I think of panting, I think of, which obviously that's totally against everything that I've learned and what I've, passed on to you guys. But basically, panting, I think what they were trying to do is just to have you access your core and work on using your air, because when we're just sitting throughout our day just typing away, we're not thinking about our breath, we're just taking as much air as we need. But when you go to sing, breathing becomes a lot more intentional, especially if you're singing a higher phrase or one that requires you to really focus on the amount of air you're taking in. So that was probably to like stimulate you thinking about your air and your core and activating those. But yeah, I don't know that I love the idea of panting as far as a pedagogical approach, which vocal pedagogy is the study of voice. But
So what about sitting down when you sing?
not ideal, but it is something that we have to do a lot of the time, especially in Nashville. I play writers rounds. Nobody's ever standing during writers rounds. So I could be that person who's kind of condescending that's like, well, I'm going to stand up because I know how to sing. Like, I just would not do that. But basically, you can still have really good posture while you're in a chair. Just do that same thing where you're like sitting up straight, rolling back your shoulders. And then a huge thing that's gotten in the way for me is guitar placement. So it might look kind of cheesy to have your guitar way high up like the Beatles, but honestly, like if you don't have to lean over at all to access your guitar, that's really going to help you be able to take in those breaths. So just like we saw earlier in the diagram, if you're hunched over, you can't use your breath as properly. And you might be playing guitar hunched over because your strap's too low or because you're not using a strap and just not realize it. So if you have it up and then you know about sitting up straight, rolling your shoulders back, that'll make a huge, huge difference. But standing really kind of is the best way to sing, especially if you're recording vocals. I absolutely would not be sitting down if you can help it.
Awesome. I think that's it.
Cool. All right, abs part 2. So when you start the first note of the phrase, you don't always have to get an enormous breath. So if I'm singing something that's super low in my range, I'm not going to have to be like, and get this huge breath. Lower notes generally don't require a huge amount of breath. That's basically for like middle to high notes that you'll need that. You can think of it in terms of percentages too, as far as how much breath you need to take in and how much of your abs you need to engage. So when you're engaging your abs, you shouldn't feel like you're doing a sit up and pushing them in all the way every single time. It just depends on what spot of your range that you're in. That'll depend on how much of the abdominal support you'll need to lean into. So you're singing in a lower range, you have basically 3 different parts of your voice. There's the chest voice, which is the low voice, mixed voice, which is middle, and then head voice is the high. If I'm singing in chest, I won't need to lean into my abs a whole lot. So maybe I would use, like, if that full sit up is 100%, I'll use maybe 20%. When I get into the mixed voice, I'm going to be using around like 50%. Head voice will probably be closer to like 80, sometimes 90 to 100. And now the differences between these registers is a lot to have to do with where the resonance sits. And as far as a mixed voice, you can basically think of it as head and chest combined. So you have the chest voice, which is like a la, and then a mixed voice is basically in the middle before you get to head voice. So head voice would be like, and then if you're mixing the two together in the middle range, it's like a, so basically that's the difference between your different registers. You got low, middle, and high, or chest, mixed voice or middle, and head voice. And then as far as what I was talking about with the resonance, so you can notice at the bottom of the diagram, that chest resonance, you're literally going to feel like in your upper chest. So all in that area, when you sing, la, you're going to feel kind of a buzzy resonance down here. And then if you're doing the mixed voice or the middle voice, you'll feel it kind of in this pocket right here, as far as where that buzzy resonance is happening, like a ah, feel that there. And then for the head voice, you're literally going to feel it in your head. So they're named the way they are for a reason. So like a ah, I feel that resonance kind of like towards the top, and I'm wanting to focus it there in order to make sure that I'm fully energizing the note and that I'm not falling flat.
Where does falsetto fall in that? Is that considered a head?
Falsetto is an upper extension of the head. I kind of just wanted to do the simple version, but
Okay.
yeah, so falsetto is really particularly easy to spot in men. So when men are basically in their low, they're like a oh, and then their middle like a and then when I get up to head voice, at a certain extent, they just basically like float up into a falsetto where it's like a like it's completely different from all of the other ones, because it's just basically like you can't even like punch in the support that hard on those because they're just like the absolute tippy top of your range. Head voice is still kind of in a singable register, but generally nobody's singing up in the falsetto besides Mariah Carey and Ariana Grande on the daily. You can hear men in pop, I would say country, they're more so in the low register, but it's some male pop singers, you can hear them kind of like dip from middle to head, but generally not falsetto. But yeah, falsetto would be those like whistle tones that Mariah Carey does and that Ariana Grande do, just that really upper extension above everything else. And as a beginner, it can be kind of not in the best interest to try to tackle those right away, just because it is the upper extreme of your register. So I would You can definitely play on the piano to see your lowest note and your highest note, but I wouldn't stay up in the falsetto for too long because it's not meant to be where we live, especially melodically. No one's writing melodies up there because it's not really comfortable to sing up there for very long.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. So as far as your registers, like I said, down in the basement, your lower register, it's not going to be so much about like leaning super heavy into your abs. It's more so going to be about placement, which we're about to go over. You'll increase the ab percentage as you go higher, leaning into it more. It's often why you see singers put a hand on their stomach. So if you're, especially like I've seen gospel singers do this, I don't know why, more than any other type of singer, but they'll be like la la la, and basically they just have their hand on their stomach the whole time. That's a reminder to engage their abs and to lean into their support. So that's the reason why they do that. Now, finding your transitions. If you want the super fancy Italian word for this, I included it so you can impress your family and friends. Don't feel like you have to memorize this. It was just kind of a little fun fact. So basically, you have three spots, three main spots of your voice. And so you're going to have two transitions, a transition from low to middle and a transition from middle to high. Those are called your passaggi, or singular would be passaggio. And basically, the primo passaggio is the first one, secondo passaggio is the second one. And that's how you're going to transition between that chest, that middle, and that head voice that you have. Now, when you figure out where your transitions are, this can be a really powerful tool in informing how you write your melodies. You're not going to write a melody that's like directly on your transition from like low to middle or middle to high, because those notes are very difficult, because you're like, oh, I'm not sure if this is like low enough for me to use my chest voice. I'm not sure, or I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's high enough for me to be able to use my chest. It's kind of like towards that upper extreme. I don't know if it's low enough that I can bring like my middle voice down there. So if you write basically verses in your chest voice and then melodies like firmly in your middle voice, that's kind of what I do, because chorus melodies, they're going to want to be higher because of course the chorus is where you make the impact. And so when we're singing higher, we're usually, energizing the notes more. A lot of times people sing louder up there. So it's just a bit more of an emotional impact. And then verse melodies, basically, like you're just setting the exposition. So it doesn't have to be this like huge, powerful melody that you're belting out in order to best serve the song.
How do you find where your transitions are?
Yeah. So basically, you'll just I go over this a little bit later, but you'll want to have a keyboard. If you don't have one, you can get one really, really cheap. But if you're really struggling financially, there are ones online. If you Google free virtual piano, where you can just press the notes. So you don't have to know how to play piano at all. I barely know any piano, just enough to be dangerous. So you can just go, or just either like an ah or an If you hum, it's harder to hurt yourself when you're humming. So I maybe just go at first, and then once you feel warmed up, open it up to like an ah and see where basically you're no longer able to use your low voice. So
Hey, Dana,
yeah.
can you switch your audio over to there's like a if you go to audio settings, there's a like pure sound for musicians or something.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because it's cutting the noise blocking is cutting out parts of what you're singing.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't remember where to switch it.
Let's see.
Original sound for musicians, I think is what it is.
Yeah, I'm under audio, but I think it might be in a different spot, maybe.
It's under, like if you click the little up arrow, then there's an audio settings, I think.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then you have to scroll down. There's a bunch of like little radio buttons. Yeah, Michelle, it used to be on the corner, but Zoom has done updates and they've made it stupid.
Okay.
Unless there is something that you see in your...
No, and I like minimized Zoom, so I'm trying to figure out how to maximize it so I can get that upper menu. Hmm. Um,
Does your
yeah, I'm not sure how to maximize it because I like minimized it. I can see like the mute stop video participants thing at the bottom, but I'm not getting the full screen of everybody anymore.
can you stop the share?
Yeah, I think I'll just do that. Oh, there you all are. Okay. Okay, I've got view at the top right. I don't know.
It's down on the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Do you see your little microphone where it says audio? And then there's a little up triangle. If you click on that, it's under audio settings.
Uh,
I wish they had it more simple. I don't understand why they don't.
oh, there it is. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm new here. Sorry. All right. So you should be able to hear. Can you
Can
hear
you
that?
sing? When you sing, it would cut out.
Oh.
Like sing a scale. Yep, that's better.
Awesome possum. All right, cool. Thank you for bearing with. Let me reshare the thing. Well, that sound check couldn't have been at a better time because I was about to play piano and sing at the same time. So, all right. So, I'd love to take a second to kind of just show what it sounds like when transitioning between the registers. So, I don't know if you guys know about Chapel Roan. If you listen to pop, you probably do. She is somebody who I love. I think her writing's excellent. And this song, Good Luck Babe, is an excellent example between shifting between like several of the registers. So the verse, I'm going to be singing in a pure chest voice, color coded at green. And then the last two lines of the pre chorus, that's when I start transitioning into like a mix. So it's a mostly chest mix. I would say it's like a 75% chest, 25% head voice mix. The chorus is mostly purple, which is a pure 50-50 head voice, chest voice mix. And then the Good Luck Babe lines, the pink ones, those go into more of a head leaning mix because those are a little bit higher. And basically, it'll be like a 75% head mix as opposed to a 25% chest. So back up the mic a little bit because I'm going to be loud. All right. It's fine. It's cool. You can say that we're nothing, but you know the truth. And guess I'm the fool with her arms up like an angel through the car's sunroof. I don't want to call it off, but you don't want to call it love. You only want to be the one that I call baby. You kiss 100 boys in bars, shooting off shots, trying to stop the feeling. You say it's just the way you are, making no excuse, not a stupid reason. Good luck, babe. Good luck, babe. You'd have to stop the world just to stop the feeling. Good luck, babe. Good luck, babe. You'd have to stop the world just to stop the feeling. So obviously the chest voice didn't project as far, but it's not supposed to. And then when you transition into mix and higher things, that's when you need to lean into your abs more. And then it also changes the quality of the voice as well.
So when you listen to a male singer like a Justin Bieber,
Mm.
right? Like what is he singing in?
It depends on the song. He usually starts out in chest, basically in the verse, and so it's like a, let's see, I haven't listened to Justin Bieber in a long time, but I would notice just in the verses, like he's like a na, 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 na. It's kind of like where I hear his voice sitting, and then he uses more of like a middle voice, I think, in his choruses, just kind of like I outlined earlier. But if there's like a specific song, I could definitely say like, oh, well, he's in this register, he's in that one. But he's a tenor, so his chest voice is naturally going to sit higher than that of like a baritone or a bass. And you can kind of just like tell he usually sounds like a little bit like chill in his chest voice too. He's like, yeah, this is what I'm singing about. This is what I'm singing about. And then he's like, oh, this is what I'm singing about now, like in the chorus, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. It just, there's like an energy difference, not just in like the timbre or the tone of the voice, but you can hear the energy shift too. So I would basically look out for tone and energy shifts.
So I think you were going to show us how do you find where your voice, where your passaggio
Yes.
or like where your focaccia is, you know?
Focaccia bread. Yes. Find your focaccia bread. Basically, um, yeah, if you don't have a keyboard, I'd highly recommend getting one. But if you don't have the means, using a virtual piano and literally just going, so you don't even have to know what notes you're on, and just going up. I do a little bit of warming up before you completely do a range test, just to make sure that everything's warmed up and you don't hurt yourself. So a good way to like just get a quick warm up would be a siren. We'll go over this a little bit later, but like an that's a good way to get warmed up pretty quickly, especially if you're in a pinch. Or using lip trill. I am a huge, huge fan of lip trills because I can do that same siren on a lip trill and it's going to feel even easier to do. So like a like those notes just felt way easier to sing because my mouth isn't open all the way, so there's not as much pressure that I need to exert, and everything just is a little bit easier to access. So like a it's getting to the top of my chest voice. Like that's about as high as I can go comfortably. So that's when I'll know to start mixing, bringing a little bit of the head voice in there. So like a and then going up into the stratosphere. Um, that's how I know I'm kind of like in a head voice because it's like getting really high. And I'm like, I'm not really mixing the chest voice in there at all anymore. It just feels like a pure, like high head voice type of thing. So literally, you don't even have to know which notes. And then once you get to what you feel like your highest note is, just kind of like be like, okay, so it's that one, and then Google what are the piano notes. If you have a physical keyboard, honestly, put stickers on it. If you're not a pianist, like there is no shame in putting stickers that say C, D, E, F, G. Like you want to maximize efficiency and don't feel self-conscious about it because your mind is having to do so much less work if it's just labeled. Eventually, you might take them off. Eventually, you might not take them off. You might really like them. So, and like even when I was like playing cello in middle school, I was referring to the stickers as to like which one was first position, which one was second position, which one was which. So, having a keyboard is basically really, really the way that you're going to be able to find transition points, warm up, do all of that stuff that you need to do. So, any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Okay, sweet. I just see that red bubble going up and up. So I'm like, are those questions?
No, people are just posting like free piano apps and
Ah,
stuff as well.
nice. Good stuff. Yes, I'm not one to gatekeep. Please share all the resources.
What about Michelle asked, how do you practice vibrato?
Ooh, so my presentation was like 60 slides, and Chad was kind of like, okay, that's kind of a lot. Maybe cut it down. So I had a vibrato slide that I took off. But basically, if you practice singing between two notes that are next to each other, sing between them slowly and then increase the speed. So if you know any music theory, you'd be maybe singing like half notes, transition to quarter notes, then transition to eighth notes. So something like an basically you're just going back and forth between the notes, and it's a matter of how fast you're going back and forth between notes. And when you have a vibrato, that's basically as fast as you can go. Like I don't even know if that would be like a 64th note or what that would be, but just taking two notes, singing back and forth between them, starting slow, and then gradually increasing the speed in which you're bouncing back and forth.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. So navigating your transitions, we kind of covered this a little bit, but there are exercises you can do in order to smooth out your transitions. So a lot of times what I experienced, especially when I was doing open mics in high school and I did not know the first thing about singing, is that I would try to belt really, really high because that's what I thought the person whose song I was covering was doing. But one, they probably had different transition spots, and we all have different transition spots. So if you can't sing Bruno Mars's voice sits ridiculously high. It's not that he's the most impressive guy because he can belt high notes. It's because his register, his range just naturally sits higher. So it sounds really impressive because it's like, oh man, I can't hit notes that high, but it's like not everyone's meant to. He is a tiny guy, and it's actually really interesting. Stature comes into play. So a lot of times when you have like really tiny like girls like in college singing opera, the like that kind of stuff, they're usually like around like 5'3" and under because their literal instrument is just smaller. And so because their instrument, the vocal folds and everything is just smaller, they're able to access higher notes and sing them more quickly. Whereas somebody who's like a 6'4" tall guy is probably going to be a bass because he's got a bigger instrument. Just like if you think about different types of drums, bongos are higher than congas are. Congas bigger and bassier. And then just like with guitars too, a dreadnought guitar is not going to sound the same as like a mini Martin because Mini Martin, doesn't have as much to it. I mean, they still both have like a comparably sized neck, but at the same time, bigger instruments are going to tend to be lower, and then smaller instruments are going to tend to be higher. But anyway, so basically, when you navigate through your transitions, there's this awesome guy that I found on YouTube. You can look up navigating transitions, and they've got exercises for you. And what's awesome is that you can sing along to them. And so he'll be just like going up the scale with you. And then you'll just feel like you've got that support and you're not just sitting staring at a piano like, oh my God, how do I do piano and voice at the same time? There's also an exercise that I learned in college called the wobble or the Tarzan. So if you think about Tarzan, he goes, basically, you're not trying to sound like Tarzan. You're just doing a similar thing with like going back and forth between two notes. So it's like a, so the fourth is what I usually do, but you can even do a smaller interval. So like a second or like a third, but I usually do a fourth, like an so you can kind of hear the Tarzan in there, but it's, not as Tarzan-y. And that'll help smooth out your transitions because what you're doing, the lower note's going to be placed in chest. And then when you get to a certain point, the middle voice is going to be the higher note. And so you're going to take that middle voice and blend it down and take the chest voice and blend it up so that basically it's less of a seam, if that makes sense, over your transition spots. And they're not kind of as out there. And yeah. Are we good on questions for right now?
Yep, we're good.
Cool. All right. Hot take. All right. So my main hot take is I think Mariah Carey is overrated. So that's the main one. But the second one is that I don't personally believe in the efficacy of prepackaged voice lessons. So why I'm sipping the haterade? It's because a lot of times when you take prepackaged voice lessons, you're trying to mimic the person. And what I mean by prepackaged voice lessons is if you have ads on like Google, YouTube, wherever you're browsing the internet, it'll say, sing better in 60 days, buy our lesson pack, blah, blah, blah. And it's one of those things where you never talk to the instructor and they never hear you sing. Because the thing is, when you try to put on a false voice and sound like someone else, that is a pretty surefire way to pick up bad habits if their voice is not like the same as yours. So if you're trying to imitate someone whose voice is basically set up differently than yours, then you'll most likely over darken or over brighten, which is what we talked about earlier with the placement, like the versus the oh. And if you over darken or over brighten is too far forward, dark is too far back, then you can create a lot of unnecessary tension. And you can also just be doing the exercises and be doing something that's not entirely correct. And that could hurt you as well because you don't have somebody with the ear to be able to tell you, like, hey, what you're doing is actually going to, hurt you in the long term, or like do it this way instead. So I will say that some awesome resources if you'd like to get started on some lessons. Lessons.com, thumbtack.com, or just type in vocal instructor in Minneapolis into the Google machine. I will say in-person lessons are definitely the best, and vocal instructors are literally everywhere, especially major metropolitan areas, but even outside of that, like in suburbs, there's literally people that teach voice everywhere. And what's better about being in person is they can look at you and see what's going on. So if your posture, if you're leaning over too much, or like if your chin goes up, or if you're not fully taking in the full breath that you can, they're going to be able to see that because you'll see them in person. Zoom lessons are also very good, but you can only see the person from here up. So if they're not fully expanding their rib cage and getting in a decent breath, I might not be able to see it because their laptop might only be from like the neck up. So a lot of times, well, me with my personal, what I do with the voice student that I teach, I make him stand up and stand a few feet back so that I can kind of see everything that's going on. But yeah, so you do just kind of run that risk. But I mean, any voice lesson is better than none, as far as improving faster than you would on your own. But also, if you don't have the time or the means, there's absolutely no pressure. I'm not over here like everyone needs lessons, because that's not the reality for all of us. Um, but if you wanted to get started with lessons, those would just kind of be my recommendations.
Do you offer online lessons though? Since most of us here are like in various places. Would you offer online to where people, because sometimes it's hard to find people you trust, right? So,
True.
do you do that? Do you do virtual lessons?
I do. So I only have limited spots, but I do offer some here and there. So you can definitely contact me afterwards. I think if you don't message me through Meetup, I think you can message me via email probably. It's Dana Baker, music producer at gmail.com. Again, I have very limited availability, so I might not be able to take like 20 people, but I can definitely see as far as like what your goals are, if we would be a good fit. And also, I offer basically critiques as well from a vocal producing perspective. So if you literally just want feedback on like when you go to sing your songs on your demos and you're wondering, like, could I have sung that in a different way that's more impactful? I'm definitely all about that. That is, vocal producing is my bread and butter, like making the fine adjustments, because I myself am a tuner. Like we talked about earlier, there's builders and tuners. I didn't really study to be a builder. I can kind of fill those shoes, but definitely tuning is kind of where I live and where is home. So if you send me recordings, I can definitely listen to them and just basically sing them back in a way that you can kind of listen to what I'm doing and make adjustments. But yeah, if 50 of you message me, I'm gonna have to be like, I can't. So yeah, we're good on questions for now.
Michelle asked, will you be talking about how to avoid or work through pitchiness?
Yes. Yes, pitch correction or matching pitch struggles is a huge question that I got multiple times. So there will be a dedicated section just for that.
Sweet.
All right. So myth number 2. Improving your singing will expand your range. I have more bad news for you. I am so sorry. We're not all supposed to have 4-octave ranges like Julie Andrews. I've got around 3.5, and that's with a lot of training. You can absolutely unlock higher notes or lower notes, like maybe like 1 to 2. And that's just because they're difficult to access right now, but you're born with them. But if people have under the impression that you can expand your range by like half an octave or an octave, that's unfortunately not how that works. You're born with the notes that you're born with, and by learning how to place notes and how to properly sing certain notes, you can access a couple, maybe like 1 or 2 lower notes and maybe 1 or 2 higher notes than you've been able to access on your own. But not everybody's gonna have a 4-octave range. That's why it's so impressive, because barely anybody has it. So even if you've got like a 2-octave range, like that's nothing to be ashamed of. You can write tons of melodies in a 2-octave range, even 1. So definitely don't feel bad if you don't feel like you have the biggest range to ever exist, because that's just biology and that's not something you can really control. Finding your key. This is also going to be super, super helpful for informing your songwriting and your melodies.
So
So,
one question
yeah.
before you jump into this, Dana. So Stu asked, he said he's still unclear on recognizing where the transitions happen. So he said, is it where you just feel the resonance change position? Is it only something the singer knows, or can you tell it on someone else?
If I was on a Zoom call with somebody and I was like running through, I could definitely tell. But basically, you're gonna feel the resonance shift once you know that you're in a certain range, but you might not know to do that shift if you are unaware of whether or not you should be in your chest or your middle. So the easiest way to find out where your transition spots are is just, can I take my chest voice any higher? Is it uncomfortable at this point? Yes, then I'm gonna have to do some mixing. So for me, it was around like F and G. Um, at that point, that's starting to get uncomfortable for me. So I'm gonna start to bring in more head voice, like a it's still the same note, but it sounds much more powerful and supported and not like I'm screaming. So the big thing is just how high are you able to, because you're gonna be dealing with the chest voice, middle voice transition more than the higher one. You'd be dealing with the higher one more in classical music, but in country, pop, all these modern genres, you're mostly going to be dealing with the chest up to head, or sorry, chest up to middle voice. So just recognize where it's no longer comfortable and you feel like you're shouting. And then that's when you start to incorporate a little more head voice. And how you can incorporate more head voice in is basically, if you think of like a puppy whining, like a, basically take that, bring that down. That's how you access your head voice. So just go, and as you slide that down, that's fully your head voice, and you can bring it down to meet your chest voice and create that mix. So hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome. And then Shelly just asked a question I think relates to what you started to talk about with finding your best key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just about to dive in. So you'll need a piano to do this so that you can track where you are. You technically could use a guitar, but I just recommend a piano. It's easier for me. It's easier for most people. And as far as finding your key, it's going to depend a lot on finding where your registers are. So I transitioned on like a, yeah, it was like more like a G sharp, A. It's kind of where my transition was. So I'm going to want to sing melodies that don't hit F sharp, or sorry, G sharp, A ton. Maybe like an A. A is fine. A is where I'm comfortably in my new range, but I wouldn't want to sing a lot of G's or G sharps. So figuring out where your transition is, you write your verses a little bit lower than your transition point, and write your choruses probably a little higher than your transition point. So the key that I actually really like is A minor. I always write in A minor for some reason. I write sad girl songs and I write them in A minor, but sometimes when I feel happy, I write in A major instead. So that's just what I've found to be comfortable for me. You can also just like pull up karaoke tracks on YouTube and be like, okay, yeah, what key is this song in? Does it feel comfortable to sing this song? And that's another way to gauge as well, without the piano stuff.
So are you saying, so kind of doing the, so I'd like transition there, right? I could tell where I was going from chest to, what is that, head?
Chest to middle. So you've got chest at the lower part. Yeah. Yep. You're definitely getting towards your higher register there. I would say your chest would actually probably be a little bit lower, like an it's probably where your chest is. Then middle, yeah. Yeah.
So what you're saying for someone to find that is you're singing to see where it starts to crack, kind of,
Where it
right?
starts to be uncomfortable and when you start to feel like you're shouting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And cracks for sure. We often, if we're singing right on our like transition note, we're gonna crack probably a lot. So I just try to avoid that note because it's hard, because you don't want to bring up the chest and feel like you're shouting. But sometimes when you're bringing in head voice a little bit too low, it can sound under energized, like an ah, like that. I would probably do a
Yeah.
ah instead, and then I'd be like an ah for the next one and bring in the head voice there. Because if you try to bring the head voice too low, your melodies can just, or your singing can just kind of fall flat a little bit and under energized. So just finding out where exactly that comfortable note is to transition on be huge.
So to kind of pull it into um like Shelly, what you do is you would find the notes that you can sing comfortably, or like the range that you can sing comfortably, and then figure out, well, what scales actually fit into that, right? Like a lot of songs that I write, I find that like if I'm going to belt, like there's like a G note that like that's the highest I can belt. So I'm going to either think like, well, is that going to be the fifth of the scale that I'm singing in, or is that going to be the one of the scale, right? So if I'm going to be singing the root note and belting that G, um, I could write in G, but I want to give myself some room so I'm not totally pushing to the edge, like Dana's saying. And this is just my untrained way of doing this.
No, that's
Um,
totally right.
so I then will maybe drop it down like a whole note. So then maybe like F is the key that I'm going to sing in. I actually write a lot of my songs in G flat because I can comfortably sing most notes in that scale. Um, and then I just write in that, and then you can always transpose for other singers. But um, anything that you write can be transposed, so you have to find what's comfortable for your own voice. And I think what Dana you're saying is you just kind of have to experiment, and like it's there's no way to say like this is your key. It has to be how it feels. And I have written songs where I'm singing too much around my break points, and I'm like, why can't I sing this song? It sounds like crap. And it's because I'm singing on my break. um and I can't get solid support, and I think everybody's a little bit different. Am I wrong on that, Dana?
No, you're completely right. Also, for those who haven't heard the term break used before, a break is the same thing as the transition, because basically your chest voice is getting so high, it's like, oh God, my voice is going to break. I've got to transition into a new register now. So the transition spot, passaggio, break, those are all interchangeable words.
Awesome.
Sweet. All right. Now, vocal placement, this is a little bit more advanced. So we've got the posture, we've got the breathing, we've got like the onset. Now we're going to talk about placing your voice. Talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's basically where you're aiming your voice to be. Um, it's all about working with the vocal resonance created by your vocal folds. It involves focusing your sound in a specific area. And so it's a lot of visualization. And basically, you're going to visualize your voice as not being too far back in your throat, not too far forward to the point where it's like really nasal, but just a very neutral placement is what we're aiming for. I use a hose sprayer analogy for placement. And while we see water, this is a great time to remind you to drink water. It is so important. If you run your car and you never get an oil change, that engine is going to break down on you. So if you're not drinking a ton of water, that's basically what's going to happen with all of your tissues and your muscles. They're just not going to optimize at the peak efficiency. A good rule of thumb that I have is I try to drink 20 ounces of water before I leave my house in the morning, because I do go into an office at like 8:30. So if I set myself up with 20 ounces right before I leave, as I'm just getting everything together, I feel so much more energized throughout the day. I feel like the cylinders are more readily firing, and it makes it so much easier to get to that 80. Because if you think you have 20 ounces in the, right in the middle or the beginning of the day, and then maybe have another 20 ounces at lunch and dinner, that's 60. And then you just have 20 to fill in between the meal times. So it's definitely doable. I wouldn't probably aim for more than 100, because you can flood your kidneys. So there can be too much of a good thing there. But I would aim to be around 80. And if you're not able to get that, it's not a big deal, because in trying to get there, you'll probably be drinking more water than you were before. And everything in life is just about getting to where you're going, but taking it in bite-sized steps or in incremental steps. So anyway, back to vocal placement. So as you can see, one hose is a very concentrated stream of water, and the other one is the sprayer, which, like sprays it out kind of like in a more wide sort of pattern. So what we're aiming for as far as vocal placement, we want our sound to be like that green hose on the left. We want it to be a concentrated, narrow beam of sound, which sounds pretty opposite of intuitive. It doesn't sound like, that's what we'd be going for. It's like, why are we making our voices smaller? But from an acoustical perspective, when you have a smaller beam of sound coming out when you sing, you're going to be able to project it farther. Whereas if you're doing kind of more so the sprayer attachment, your sound is just going to be kind of like here and it's not going to go as far. So you're able to go farther like this rather than like this. So what that would kind of sound like is la, narrow beam. And then if I were to spread the corners of my mouth and have kind of more of like a spray, la, it's one, it kind of doesn't sound as good, but two, your sound isn't able to go as far. And not that you have to fill up the Met Opera House when you sing, but if you're able to sing in a way that is more impactful and has more support and energy and sound behind it, then that's going to help out a lot with the muscles up here not getting tense on you, with being able to sing in a way that's just basically optimum for what we're going for. So to summarize, you want to make sure that your sound is reminiscent of kind of like a laser beam of sound. Make sure it's not swallowed. So it's not like an, it's not too far forward. And I am a huge fan of using my hands in order to inform my voice of what we have to do. So feel like if you think that you're singing too much like in like your throat, feel like you can take your hand and just kind of do this and your voice will mimic what your hand is doing. It is the wildest thing, but it's a really good tool in order to get your voice to do what you're trying to get it to do. And then it's the same thing as it's too far forward, just bring it back to nice neutral placement. And you want to make sure the corners of your mouth aren't spread too wide because that'll make it really weird. And it's also going to modify your vowels, which we don't want. We want to sound like, not like we're speaking, but it needs to be understandable. And if you spread the corners of your mouth too much, it can start to sound a little bit too country twang and not what we want usually. Even country singers, they don't usually sing with like their corners completely out. So
What if I want to sound like Fran Drescher? Do you have any tips on that?
put everything in your nose. I would put everything in my nose, focus the resonance right here to sound like her.
Wah!
Yeah, just sing like that. Perfect. Class over. Anyway, so we're going to get into the real nitty gritty now. Straws are so awesome. You've probably seen them if you've seen any kind of advertisements for like singing online. Everybody's got a straw and it's just like, why are we using straws? Like what's the point? What is this trend? It's not just a trend because I actually, not to be a hipster, but I was using straws back in like 2012. But anyway, when you use a straw, it is an SOVT exercise. That stands for semi-occluded vocal tract. We actually touched on this a tiny bit earlier. So basically, if I'm singing la versus if I had a straw, like a so my mouth isn't completely closed, just a little bit. That's what SOVT means, just your mouth is partially closed, but it's a really fancy way to say that. So again, more fun facts to impress your friends and family with. Basically, from a scientific perspective, what's happening is that the closing of the mouth is creating more air pressure to go back to your vocal folds. And then when it comes in conjunction with the air coming into your vocal folds, it just balances the air pressure out really, really nicely. And this is basically like yoga for your voice. It's like gentle stretching, it's lower impact. So if you are hitting a really high phrase and singing it outright is just really difficult to navigate, singing it through a straw or even through a lip trill, like a lip trill is also an SOVT exercise, which is why both of them are very, very prevalent in vocal instruction because you're basically still using your vocal folds. They're still making sound, but there's not the pressure to like project as much, to like completely open everything up. It's just a really awesome way to be able to make some sound without, a lot of exertion.
When you do the lip trills, the zoom still sounds like it's cutting out for some reason. I don't know if it's on the right setting, but I think we get the idea.
Yeah, so it's like a
Yeah.
hopefully you're able to hear that. Like
Yeah.
Just like kind of like what like toddlers do, like the thing. Not that I have one, but like I've seen them do it. So um
Yes. And you have to wet your lips a little bit because if they're not lubricated, they don't move.
I apply chapstick like all the time. So I think I don't have to wet my lips because of that reason. But yeah, if you're somebody that isn't applying it 18 times a day like I am, then having some lubrication there is important because things aren't really going to jive and gel, and the lips slapping against each other is not going to go as well. So I would say at least put lip balm on, but you can also lick your lips as well. As far as what I was talking about with the pressure equalization, this is the diagram to kind of show that. So the person is using the straw. They've got some pressure reflected back at the lips, going back to the vocal folds, then the pressure from the lungs. Everything's just kind of evened out. Something else to take notice of, and again, this is a little bit advanced as well, but your soft palate. This is also something that is talked about in vocal circles all of the time. So if you touch your teeth and then you touch the gums like right behind it, like the roof of your mouth, that is your hard palate, because basically you can feel gum there, but it's pretty hard because it's bone. I wouldn't encourage you to follow your finger all the way back and like choke yourself, but your soft palate basically is behind where your teeth are, and it's not as bony. It's just basically tissue. And the thing is, you might not know where it's located or how to move it consciously, but you actually do it all the time when you yawn. So if you've ever yawned, you are raising your soft palate and you're lifting it. So you wouldn't yawn like, oh, you'd be like, and what you do when you're creating all that space in the back and you feel that lift happening, that's your soft palate. If your soft palate comes down when you're singing like a versus a you can hear the difference. So your soft palate wants to be nice and raised and create plenty of space back here so that nothing's tense and that you've got all of the space to work with in order to emit sound. Warming up. So some people think you've got to sing for like 45 minutes to an hour to warm up, and that is absolutely not the case. I literally have studied classical voice and I've done opera workshop, vocal pedagogy. I've been in operas. Nobody's warming up for 45 minutes, especially if you're going to be singing for like 3 hours. 15 to 20 minutes is really the sweet spot. But if you don't have that time every single day, don't feel like you have to absolutely devote 15 to 20 minutes every day. Even just doing like 3 to 5 minutes is going to make a big difference. So, like when you're cramming for an exam, if you spend an hour studying the night before, it's not going to be as impactful as if you took maybe 10 minutes a day to study for a week leading up to the exam. You're basically training a muscle group. And so, you could just try to Arnold Schwarzenegger your way through, benching 400 pounds, or you can work up incrementally and be like, okay, well, I'm going to do like 75 this week. Maybe next week I'll do 150. You can definitely work up to going longer, especially if you're not used to using your voice that much. Consistency is the biggest key. So any warming up is better, and you can work up to more. If you're wanting a quick warm up, sirens and unvoiced breathing exercises are excellent. Sirens are so obnoxious, especially if you're doing them in public places, i.e., the School of Music, and everyone's like, oh, and it's like, oh my God. But if you're in a place where people are understanding that you're singing, or you're just kind of like, home alone, that's the best time to do these. Or you can just do them and be like, deal with it. I'm just getting my vocal gains. So a siren is, again, that slide. So you're able to sing a note a lot more, or you're able to sing multiple notes a lot faster. So if I went, probably take me a while to get through all of the notes in my range. But if I siren, I just hit all of them in like 10 seconds. So obviously, it's not something that you're going to use as a crutch or rely on. It's just a quick way to get things warmed up pretty quickly. But obviously, if you did work up the, you're going to feel better and more warmed up by actually taking the time. It's just that's a little bit of a shortcut if you're strapped for time or you just want to do something and you don't have the time to sit down at the piano. And then unvoiced breathing exercises is where you're basically engaging your air and your core. So you're doing that onset, but you're not doing it on a pitch. So if I were to go ba ba, that's technically a pitch. But if I were to go ch 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 ch, like on a ch, like the word cheese, I'm technically not singing, I'm not phonating, but I'm still activating the air and the muscles in order to sing. So unvoiced breathing exercises are a great place to start, especially like in the car, in the elevator at work, anywhere where you need to not be like incredibly loud. You can just do a ch, 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 ch. Or if you want to do kind of like a little more difficult, ch, 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 ch. If you want to do like a little quicker one, if you're feeling like you've just got it. So those two are kind of the go-tos as far as like getting started with warming up, or just if you're going to do any warming up at all and just have a abbreviated period of time in which you can. Those are the two that I would kind of go towards. There are tons of different warm-ups, but I'm just going to run through the main three that I encounter for the most part. So unvoiced is what I literally just demonstrated, the ch, 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 ch. So it's like a beatbox. In addition to ch, you can use the P and the B sound. And basically you're wanting it to sound like a kick drum. You don't want to go puh, puh, puh. You want to go and basically make that sound, or like a actually buh would be a voiced one. So just like P and CH. And basically that's a really great one for waking up your abdominal muscles and your core and making sure that they're on board with everything. Also with, utilizing your air support. The next one that's a step up from that would be a staccato exercise. So that would be like a buh, 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 buh. And what staccato means, it just means separated. So instead of being like buh, buh, it would be like a buh, buh. Just like you tap it, you back off of it very, very quickly. And then warming up legato exercises, I wouldn't touch these very first thing because one, you're gonna make it harder for yourself. And two, it's just not the most efficient way to get things going. So for the legato exercises, that's something like a la, la. So it's just basically instead of being like short and like buh, it's like long and sustained. These are awesome to do for melodies. So if you're about to record, if you do a legato exercise, it's going to allow you to feel what you should be feeling as far as singing your melody, because people generally don't sing really detached, separated melodies. Like you wouldn't be like I want you back. You'd be like, I want you back. So basically, it sets you up for creating like a more flowing lyrical type of melody, which is what we want when we sing.
Ron had a question, Dana. He said, do you recommend vocal warm-ups daily, even if you're not singing?
Yes, definitely. Something's better than nothing. And the thing is, even if you don't hit it every single day, just doing more than what you're accustomed to doing right now is a step in the right direction. But yeah, I would do a little bit of something, something every day. It's really consistency is the biggest thing.
Cool.
Awesome. So, myth number 3, no one really warms up, so it must not be super important. You hear people all the time, they're just like, oh, yeah, I don't warm up, especially like, A-list celebs, but they are incorrect. A lot of people don't warm up, but a lot of people also get raspy and they lose their voice. So, sometimes if everybody else is jumping off the bridge, we don't also want to jump off the bridge. You wouldn't run a marathon without stretching first, and warming up is basically stretching your muscles, just getting everything set and ready to go. And especially if you're recording something, you're going to be running at least double the amount of takes if you don't warm up first. So warming up just gets everything ready to go. And I know for me, I've been doing a lot of like songwriting and top lining lately and like recording my own demos. And I will just, if I don't warm up before, I'll be like, God, I can't sing. What is wrong with me? I'm on take 8. It still sounds like crap. But if I warm up before, then it's like, oh, okay, I've got it by like take 3 or 4 or something like that. You know what I mean? So it also does something psychologically too. So if you're able to get yourself to a place where you're able to sing most optimally, you're going to be saving time, and you're also not going to be beating yourself up for not being able to perform at the caliber that you want to. All right, the big question that a ton of people ask, matching pitch. So surprisingly enough, my answer to this is training your vocal muscles. A lot of times when we can't match pitch, our voices are just not utilized enough, because a lot of times when people can't match pitch readily or they can't access it as much as they'd like to, those people definitely are not as confident, so they don't sing as much. And the thing is, when you don't activate these muscles, it makes it harder to engage them. So if you train your vocal muscles to sing a little bit every day, it's going to be easier to make that connection between the notes that you hear in your head and the sound that you're able to put out. As far as doing pitch matching challenges, which would be the next step up from that, I found a site called Singing Carrots. I didn't do a deep dive. I just basically looked on the first page of Google. So there might be a better one. But this one gives you a range test and also basically tells you if you're on the money, if you're like too high or if you're sharp or if you're too low or you're flat. So if you're able to do those just daily, consistently, that'll actually help tremendously. And when I say like sing a little bit every day, you don't have to be belting out Whitney Houston. You can literally just be like humming, like on the way to work, like, like even just humming along to the radio, singing along to the radio, that's still doing it. Again, if you haven't warmed up and it's 7 a.m., maybe don't do Whitney. But like if you're listening to something like a Bon Iver or lo-fi something, that would be a way to not have to sit at a piano and still just get the benefits of warming up your voice a little bit. What if I struggle with feeling raspy and or losing my voice after I sing? Well, this is most likely due to excess tension. A lot of times people will get tension in the jaw, tongue, eyebrows, or a combination. For me, when I was singing the wrong way when I was 18, it was pretty much all of those. Tension is almost always caused by a lack of adequate support. So when you're not fully engaging your abs to the amount that you need to, the other smaller muscles up here try to help and basically like clamp down in order to further support you. And if you just support enough with your abs, these mechanisms up here, these ones that aren't meant to take a beating, usually they'll chill and they won't try to intervene as much. But you can also be supporting with your abs a ton, and it's just muscle memory that your muscles are just creeping in and trying to help. So if you're engaging your abs enough and you're still having tension problems, you'll want to watch yourself in a mirror and see what gets tense. So the eyebrows usually go like this, and then the tongue will have like an indent in the middle, and you'll notice it like a like there'll be like an indent like right in the middle of the tongue because it's trying to clamp down and help. And of course, we talked about earlier, the tongue is huge and it's really muscular. So getting that tongue tension out of the way can be really, really difficult, but noticing that it's happening is the first step. And I would say massaging out these areas while you sing will make it so that they can't lock up on you. So if you're like an they can't lock up on you if you're actively massaging them. Obviously, you can't do that with your tongue. So you might just kind of like sing with your tongue outside of your mouth, like an which I know is really attractive, but it's just away. And then moving it side to side, you can like obviously it sounds very funny, but it's a freer sound. And if you're able to take that free sound and replicate it while your tongue's not doing that weird side to side thing, like an I replicated the same sound that I had that I just did with the tongue being weird, but now I'm able to sing in a way with my tongue back where it belongs and it's not getting in the way. Now, you're not going to fix tension problems in 4 seconds like that. That's not real life. That was more just a demonstration. But the more that you practice massaging things out and being aware of them and not letting them get in the way, they'll stop getting in the way as much. A lot of it, unfortunately, is just undoing bad habits. So massaging out tension in those areas is a great way to get them out of there. But of course, your first line of help is definitely supporting more with your abs. How are we doing on questions?
I think we're good.
Awesome, awesome. All right. What if I sound flat or under energized in my recordings? This is what I specialize in with vocal producing. So, like I said earlier, your hands inform your voice as to what to do. So, if my hands are coming down and I'm trying to sing a phrase, it's basically gonna bring the pitch down. So, like an versus an basically when you raise your hands, the pitch and the energy is going to raise, but if you do this, then not so much. Which honestly, working with some R&B singers who have more of a propensity to be sharp rather than flat, doing this sort of thing helps it so that it actually returns to the pitch it's supposed to be and it's not sharp. And then also, as far as the energy goes, even when we're singing ballads, we have to put more energy into the recording than we think we do. So I love just swinging my hands around above my head. What that's going to do is it's going to help lift that soft palate that we were talking about earlier, like that yawn, the part back here. It's going to help that lift. And this also, just doing something with your hands is going to distract you from your body wanting to get tense and for you hyper fixating on what you're singing. So especially if you've already sang like 5 or 6 takes and you still don't have it, if you just do something with your hands to distract yourself from the singing is going to sound better, because sometimes we really get in our own way, and we just have to get out of our own way and just enjoy singing in order to make the best sound possible.
So are you moving your hands while you're singing? What if that
Yep.
shakes a little bit?
What do you mean shakes? Like your voice?
Like, yeah, like I feel like if I'm moving my hands, that might be like, or are you doing it in like rhythm kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if I try to do it in rhythm, it's gonna lock up on me and I'm gonna create tension this way.
Mm.
So if I'm like, I want you back, like I'm just like, I'm taking that tension and I'm just putting it somewhere else. So like an I want you back, like this should be a completely different movement. I don't know if you've ever done the silly little thing where you're patting yourself on the head and rubbing your tummy, and those are two completely independent motions, but that's kind of what you're gonna want to tap into. So you're doing just like something like this, not connected to the music at all, and then you're singing your song, and then because you're not fixating on getting the perfect notes anymore, there's a freedom that unlocks.
And you can add that to your live show too. You can just, walk
Yeah,
around
dude.
stage flailing. It's
During your
awesome.
writers round, be like, I mean, I was gonna play guitar, but like I've just got to do this. I just got to be in the moment here, you know. Nobody will look at you like you have 4 heads. But no, basically what we're wanting to do with that, we're trying to find that freedom. We're trying to find that free feeling. And then once we get it down by doing this, once we know what it feels like, we can start to do it without the hands. And so you uncouple them from there.
Very cool.
Thanks. All right. So this one was a tough pill for me to swallow when I was 18. How come I don't sound the same in my head that I do in recordings? Because everybody's like, oh my God, I don't sound the same. I sound awful. I hate the sound of my own voice. And like, big same, big same. It's one of life's cruel truths. From an acoustics perspective, we're never going to sound the same outwardly to other people that we sound in our head. And a lot of times, if we try to like hear ourselves and self monitor, you're probably over darkening and you're kind of swallowing the sound, and it's going to be more in your throat, which means people aren't going to be able to hear it out here. And you also might be creating tension and over darkening your sound. So the best way is to just record yourself. You just have to get over that hump. It'll be cringy, but you just kind of have to do it in order to get used to hearing what you sound like, and honestly to improve. Because what I was talking about earlier with the prepackaged voice lessons, a lot of us just don't have that awareness of what things are supposed to sound like or feel like. But when you hear yourself on a recording, it's like, oh, okay, so the way that I was singing it was like under energized, or it was like, a little bit weird. And then if you actively are able to take that information and apply solutions to the next take that you do, then that's gonna improve your vocal performance by a lot. But yes, no one likes to hear themselves except maybe narcissists. Myth number 4. I can't sing. Nobody wants to hear me sing. Incorrect. If you can speak, you can sing. Basically, that's called phonating. So if I'm doing like a or a or like that's phonating, because phonating is creating sound. If you're speaking on a note and you're creating sound. Therefore, it is not that far removed from singing. There's a lot of similarities there. Your vocal folds when you sing as opposed to speak are just vibrating faster. They're vibrating a little bit slower with speech, but they're still vibrating and they're still, creating that sound. As far as the second half, every aspect of your singing that you may struggle with is absolutely trainable. So matching pitch, you're not a lost cause. Singing with tension, you're not a lost cause. Not being able to belt as high as you want to, not a lost cause. Don't doubt your abilities. We are our own worst critics, and oftentimes our struggles are not as severe as they may seem, or they're just more fixable than we know. In conclusion, don't quit. Consistency is key. Singing is 85% mental. We often get in our own way. You can adjust accordingly once you know what things sound like and feel like, just like I was talking about with recording yourself. If you know what you're trying to sound like and you know what you're trying and not imitating another singer, what you authentically are supposed to sound like, and you know what things are supposed to feel like as far as that freedom we were talking about with the hand thing, that is what we're after. It just takes time to improve, like with anything else. Again, you can't bench 400 today. I don't think any of us can. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a bodybuilder here, but if we want to bench 400, we've got to work up to it in incremental steps and start where we're at, even if that's just like lifting 10 pounds. Just do a little bit every day, and that's going to make the biggest difference. And I stole this from Chad's Instagram story. Sorry, not sorry. But showing up daily, what we think it means, pounding the pavement, doing the most every single day. If I don't, I'm a failure. But here's what it actually means. Some days you have 100% to give. Other days you might have 30%. Other days you might have 70. Other days you might have 40. And it just fluctuates. So like I'm in the pro membership with Chad, and we had an exercise to do this week. I did 3 of the object writings, and then I did the song titles and going into them and stuff, but I missed 2 of the object writings because I've been preparing for this and I've just had a really busy week. And the thing is, my songwriting's still improving, even though I didn't do the full assignment, which I'm sorry, Chad, but it still kept me accountable. And I object wrote more this week than I had in several weeks. So doing anything at all is better than nothing. And don't beat yourself up if you're not able to show up fully every single day. So
I think that applies to, I mean, that applies to songwriting, it applies to vocal, like it applies to everything, right? Yeah,
exactly.
that's awesome. I was gonna say Victor might be able to like bench press like 400 pounds. Like he, you know, that bookcase behind him, he can lift that thing with the books in it.
Nice. That's awesome. Just get those gains, man.
Yeah. So
But
what other questions? So are you open to questions now, Dana?
oh yeah, I was just about to say, any more questions, throw them at me.
Victor raised his hand.
I do have one, Dana. Do you have any thoughts on what to do about phlegm-related problems being downstream from a bad set of sinuses? Does clearing the throat a lot irritate it? I tried Gollum juice. I've tried everything. I can't get rid of it.
So yes, phlegm is a huge problem. And basically, if you are clearing your throat a lot, it's going to be like what we talked about with the vocal fry, where it just kind of creates a friction between your vocal folds. But of course, it's really uncomfortable to have phlegm on your vocal cords. So of course you want to clear it. Something that is unfortunate, but is usually a big help, is just making dietary changes. So if you find that having dairy is something that causes you to be more phlegmy, then unfortunately you might just have to, limit the dairy. That's usually the thing that creates phlegm. Also fried foods. If you look up on Google, I've got it saved on my phone, but basically there is a list of phlegm causing foods and a list of phlegm busting foods that like help. And that's stuff like, it's very water dense, like a celery or carrots, I think are 2 of those that really help. And then something you can do. So I recommend when you're sick doing a salt water gargle that can also clear your vocal folds in a really like kind of like antibacterial way and just get all the crud out of there. So I would say saltwater rinses, look at dietary stuff. And then if you drink more water, you're going to create less phlegm. So if you're drinking that 80 to 90 ounces, it's going to flush it out as well.
And you have plenty of time to sing in the bathroom.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, steam is good too. So if you're taking a couple more showers and using a humidifier, that can help too.
Jeanette has a question.
So I'm probably answering this question already, but obviously you said one of them was if you record your voice and you practice it and you're still not used to hearing your voice. I heard something called bone conduction. Does that have anything to do with how it affects how you sound and how you hear it differently as opposed to someone else hearing it?
I believe so.
Me, yeah, because for me, like I mean, I'm obviously been writing music as much as anyone, but like when I record my voice, I sound like I'm sounding like this. And even though when I change my pitch, I could feel it, but my ears don't agree. And I'm like, it drives me nuts And I could definitely make the steps today, writing it, but it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, so as far as sounding like so unenergized, that's going to be soft palate, and that's going to be standing up and using your hands, just trying to do everything you can to energize a recording. I look absolutely insane when I'm in the studio. Sometimes I'm just like, we're going and we're doing all the things, like literally I look so cringy, but doing that makes the recording just so much more lively, and it can also help, up your pitch too. So if you're like sounding really like flat and just overall just kind of like uninspired, just putting all the energy that you can, looking like an idiot or a cheerleader, that'll be a big difference. Because I tell people when I'm vocal producing them, there's this one girl that we swat away the birds. I'm like, you got birds in your head, you gotta swat them away. And she's like, oh God. And then she sings so much
Okay.
better, and she doesn't sound asleep anymore because she's focusing on the birds and her hands are activated. Therefore, her body is activated and she's able to exert more energy.
Okay, I'll put myself in the scene then. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Hansi said a few jumping jacks before singing helps energize his voice.
Every time I work out, I sing better that day. Every single time. I hate working out, but I do it because I know I'm going to sound better singing wise. I work with a trainer and I'm like getting these gains. I'm like, I'm just trying to get these vocal gains though. Like, do you even lift, bro? Yeah, my soft palate. But yeah, activating your cardiovascular system is going to make it so much easier to access your breath. Like when I first wake up in the morning, and I also have asthma, which is like, why I love singing and I'm a singer. Why did I get this placed on me? But when I take my asthma medication too, and you guys might not even know if you have exercise induced asthma or not, but I do. That makes a huge difference because when I take my inhaler, it basically like opens up my lungs so that I'm able to take in breath more readily. So when you activate your cardiovascular system by doing like a little bit of cardio, I think Zumba is really fun for those of us that don't like to work out. Just put on some Zumba, and then you don't even have to follow them exactly. Just something to get your heart rate up and to get your breath kind of working. That's a huge difference in being able to get better breaths and more energized singing.
What are your thoughts on like volume level, right? Like I think sometimes I tend to try to sing too loud, and then that leads me into some of the tension areas. So like what are your thoughts on just volume?
Yeah, tenors have a propensity for that. So what you'll want to do is focus on your placement. So don't feel like you have to be super duper loud in every register. Like we created microphones to amplify our voices for a reason. So when you focus on that narrow beam of sound, you're not going to be able to self-monitor and hear yourself as well in your head, but your sound is going to go so much further when you concentrate it in that way. And it's not going to be something that like tension creeps in quite as much, I've found, because everything's optimized and just running efficiently. And so if you're doing like that hose sprayer thing where it's just kind of like singing like la rather than la, like the second one was projected a lot farther and I felt like I was doing a lot less. So just having that knowledge of placement, I think, is really key to having stronger singing, but never ever feel like you're pushing. Like you can really lean into your abs, but don't feel like you're pushing the sound out. It'll just come out the way it's supposed to.
Michelle said hers is the opposite. She is told she sings too soft. What are your thoughts on projecting better?
Surprisingly, it's the same answer. So you're gonna want to get that narrow beam of sound. So instead of spreading it out wide like this, she's spreading it out probably a little bit. So it's kind of like an where you want an like a thin line coming out of your face that you can kind of lean into with your abs. And when you have that abdominal support, it's going to be easier to increase the amount that you're singing at, like the decibel level, in the most low impact way and efficient way. Less breathy. Yes. So concentrated is the name of the game. So it's not just a beam of air that's like ooh, it's ooh. So it's a thin stream, but it's still very energized and very concentrated. You're just taking your sound and just basically narrowing it in.
Any other questions for Dana? Victor.
Dana, I had a couple of questions about about posture. In my youth, I worked in radio, so it was all about, I sat in front of an RE20 a lot. And I noticed, for instance, when I stood up to do my voice stops, the voice really, it deepened, everything sounded much better. But some of the things we do as singers, I think if we're not formally trained, we tend to watch what others are doing, and that may not be the best way. So I'm going to bring up a couple of singers for you. One is this an advisable thing to do? And the other is just kind of out of curiosity. So I've noticed that the English singer Jake Bugg, who has a kind of a nasally voice, it's been described as, I think, a hornet under a paper cup. And he sings kind of right into his mic, but when he goes for a high, loud noise, throws his head back. And I'm wondering, I think maybe he's trying not to pin his microphone, but I'm wondering if he's doing anything, if that helps him to maintain control over his vocal cords. The second singer, and this is just curious since you brought up falsetto, or Chad did, Julian Ehrlich from the band Whitney sings almost exclusively in falsetto. And I'm just curious, is he doing anything to his voice he's going to be sorry about in 20 or 30 years?
Yeah, so we'll start with Wasp in a Cup. So basically, a lot of people will back off the mic because they don't want to have the audio clip and they don't want to overwhelm the microphone. By doing this, I don't know if you remember in the diagram, this is one of the no-nos. Because what's happening is you're literally reaching for the note and you're creating tension in your tongue and your jaw by reaching for the note instead of reaching for the note using your abdominal muscles. So that is actually going to hurt him, unfortunately, in the long run. I've seen that a lot too. People will either like go like this or they'll like crane their neck forward, like to reach for the note. And basically that's just creating tension in different ways. So you always want to lean into your abs as your main support source. And your abs can take a beating. It's like the strongest muscle group you've got in your body. So you always want to focus there. And then as far as singing in falsetto, fun fact, there's a ton of different voice types. So the standard is soprano, alto, tenor, bass, but there are subtypes within that. One is a countertenor. So countertenors just sing a lot higher than a lot of people do. I've not heard him, so he might not be a countertenor, but he might be. So tenor is usually regarded as the highest male voice type. But if you're a countertenor, you're actually singing even higher to the point where you're almost singing in like mezzo, potentially soprano range. We saw this a lot in classical music back in, I would say, like Beethoven's day. And you have countertenors, and then you've had the castrati, which unfortunately, their voices would be high and they would be maintained high for that reason. But some people just have a voice that just naturally sits up there. It's very, very rare, but it's definitely possible. So his range, like I told you with Bruno Mars earlier, his range sits really high. His range might just sit really, really high and be a countertenor.
Stu, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just wanted a kind of reference song, and I was just thinking of the Beatles song "I Feel Fine" for the recognizing the chest and transition to mixed voice. Is it right to think that the verse to that, when John Lennon sings "Baby's Good to Me," that's using the chest voice, and when they do the chorus bit, "I'm in love with her and I feel fine," is that using a mixed or head voice? Am I getting that right?
So as far as the melody goes, he's actually in chest the whole time. I'm sure I'm in love with her and I feel fine. Like that's probably actually chest, but the harmony above, I'm in love with her and I feel fine. That's more of like a mixed voice, I would say. So kind of both are happening.
Okay. Is there a song where the lead vocal, a reference song that you mentioned that it's often good to use the chest voice for the chorus, chest voice for the verse, and then the mixed voice for the chorus. Is there a reference song that you can give us that we can just refer to and always know can refer to that for a male singer?
For a male singer, okay. I had Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan pulled up, but I can do some digging as far as one that definitely fits it for male voices. Off the top of my head, it's just usually what pop singers do, like male pop singers. I would say probably Stay With Me by Sam Smith. It's just true, I'm not good, and Stay With Me. It's like a solid like middle mix. So I would say probably a lot of Sam Smith songs, but that one in particular comes to mind first.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Hans, asked, how do I get rid of unintentional wobble in my singing, like not vibrato?
Yeah, so another narrow beam of sound thing. So if you have like a wobbly tone, like an if you narrow out that sound, you're kind of condensing it and making it so that there should be a little bit less wobble happening. But also that just kind of happens with older singers. Their hyoid bone calcifies and things just they just shift. So people that are, past a certain age, things just get a little bit wobblier, and it happens even to opera singers that are singing every single day. It's just a matter of getting older. Things become wobblier and a little bit harder to control. So that's just biology. But as far as wobbliness, just in general, just really focusing on narrowing the sound so that there's not as much space for it to wobble.
What is that certain age? I'm just
You're not there yet.
okay.
No, this is like people like that are like in retirement home age.
Okay.
You ain't there yet, Chad. You good. You Gucci.
No, Hansi's not there either, from what I can tell. Michelle said, what about stylistically, like changes on vocals? Like, how do you go from more modern instead of old fashioned?
Old fashioned tends to use a little bit more vibrato, whereas modern is a little bit more straight toned. I think modern also, I think the melodies are just constructed differently. The production's different. So you just have different vocalizations happening. If you want to know how to sing more modern, if just listening to modern singers is a huge thing, just like kind of like A-B it out, like listen to somebody that's like a Doris Day versus like a Charlie XCX and just see what they're doing differently. But the main thing is just using more straight tone. So instead of that like vibrato, it's more like an like straight tone type of thing. So you're not encouraging that vibrato quite as much. But if your voice naturally uses vibrato and you're causing issues trying to straight tone, just lean into that, because you've got people like Lana Del Rey that are still doing like a vintage sound. And if that's what's natural to you, you shouldn't try to like fix it or make it different just to kind of sound like somebody.
Yeah, like young singers, how they pronounce some of the things they have. There's this weird like pop singer accent that I can't really like imitate, but you hear it. Like the word that I hear it most on is like self. Like I think to myself. So it's like a diphthong, right? Like it's a vowel that changes midstream.
Yeah.
And then they also do that with like the word touch, touch. It's like a itch at the end, and I can't imitate it, but all of them do it.
I feel like the emo phase, which sorry, it was never phase, still an emo kid at 30, but I feel like the emo era, they like invited so much weird pronunciation, like we'll carry on. And I think like this is basically like the watered down version of that. We don't pronounce our consonants anymore. So this was like, I'm so serious, like literally that song you showed us last week. It's like mush mouth is what I call it. So if you lean too much into over enunciating, like I'm so serious, you get into like musical theater, which is obviously a different ball game entirely with different stylistic choices. But yeah, it's just the vibe that people are doing. I don't know. It just young people. I don't relate.
Yep. Yep. And then they all copy each other. Everybody sings exactly the same. You can't tell the artists apart. Awesome. Well, Dana, this has been great. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Hopefully, there's some helpful tips. I know that I picked up on some things, and I'm gonna experiment a little bit more with trying to find out where my voice is actually changing. So, this is great. And I'm also gonna want to try the straw thing. I've seen it, but I never understood the straw thing until you, where you told us.
Yep.
And I also want to think about like I talk for a living. Like my day job is I talk all day long, and like I just wonder, I'm probably shelling my voice every single day. So, thank you, Hans. You had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to show the straw that I use. It's like a regular drinking straw. It really helps me out.
Is that like a metal drinking straw? That's cool.
Not like a metal one, so that I don't have to keep getting new ones. but it really helps me when my voice is tired and I need to do some singing or speaking. So I always keep it handy.
Yeah,
My desk.
it's literally yoga and stretching for your voice. And if you want to go like pro level with it, they actually sell these things called singing straws that are specifically designed for singers. They'll have a thick one, a middle of the road one, and a really thin one. The thin one is hard mode. It's very hard to sing through that one. But if you really wanted to get those vocal gains, you can get the specialized straws that have different circumferences in order to achieve different goals.
Cool. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Dana, awesome job. Nice presentation, and you covered so much ground, so thank you. Next workshop that's coming up, August 20th. I scheduled another just kind of casual hangout, so where we can sort of hang out together and get together there. And then if you're not part of the Pro Writer group, we meet weekly on Saturday mornings. And Dana was talking about we have different assignments, and we cover different topics where it's a weekly thing, and then everybody gets together. We've got a great group going right now. More info is at athomesongwritingcourses.com. It's a monthly subscription membership, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So Dana's part of it, and a few of the others here are part of it too, and it's been fun so far. So thanks everybody. And then the other workshop coming up in September, we're going to be writing a full song lyric in 60 minutes. So we're going to get you out of the writer's block and writing some ideas quickly. So lots of good stuff. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks so
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
having
have a
me.
good rest of the day.
Thanks all.
Yeah.